Hello, good afternoon. This is Rabbi Sachs from the Chai Center, and welcome to the Chai Academy. Chai Academy is a classes we've been given began because of COVID. There's the silver lining, ladies and gentlemen. It began because of COVID and has continued ever since. The what we're discussing now, this is part 4 of Teshuva, repentance. We're before Rosh Hashanah, and so since we're before Rosh Hashanah and the Yom Kippur, which is all about Teshuva, so we began this course a few days ago. Now each course is self-contained, and so if you're tuning in late, you can listen to this entire course and you'll gain information. And if you would like to review or see previous courses, then simply go to thechaicenter.com, thechaicenter.com/academy. So, hi Eileen. So we've been discussing Teshuva, and yesterday, the Maimonides was discussing that we have to view our scale of merits and demerits as even. And we view it that way, and with the understanding that if we do one more good deed, one more mitzvah, whether it's between person to person, or whether it's between person to God, and we just do one good deed, we can tip the scale in our favor. Flip side of the coin, of the same coin, is if we do one demerit, we transgress. By the way, even though sin comes from the Torah, sin I feel is very kind of not Jewish, so that's why I use trespass, transgress, etc. So if a person does something negative, they can tip the scale the other way. Now, if the scale is tipped to the positive, expect positive things. If not now, a little later. If the scale is tipped negative, expect negative things, unless you do teshuva, repentance, to basically get rid of the negativity. And this is the time of year God looks and God listens and God judges, and therefore there are a few things we do. One is we increase our prayers. We do some additional introspection of how can I be better? What have I done? And what can I do to improve myself? And then tzedakah, you give charity. So because charity shows that you're giving. And so God said, okay, they're kind, I'll be kind. They're giving, I'll be giving. They don't discriminate to say, how much did I give, and is that person worthy? God said, I won't discriminate how much to give, and is that person worthy? So it's basically, you're creating this mirror image with God. We left off yesterday on a very upbeat note that says that even the very wicked can do teshuva. And if they do teshuva, they are accepted. If they do teshuva, they regret, remorse, resolve, then they're the same boat as everybody else. In fact, maybe even better, because they tasted the other side. And now, after tasting the other side, they reject it. And now they've come to the good side of the force. They've crossed the line to the good side. They are rewarded even greater, and that's why it does say Maimonides, the Talmud, the Tanya, and other places. It says where Balei Teshuva stand, where people who have returned, repented, stop their negative ways, where they stand spiritually, is loftier than somebody who hasn't had the need to repent. Now of course, everybody repents. We're talking about, let's take a mitzvah. Let's take pork as for a Jew. So I've never had pork. I don't know what it is. I don't miss it. I don't even like the smell, etc. But for somebody who loves it and says, you know what, for God, not for me, because I love it. For God, I am and I will give it up is way better than someone like me who has never been tempted, never tasted it, etc. Right? Ask me to give up chocolate, and I'll put up a fight. But if I did it for God, that's tremendous. In general, by the way, life's like a box of chocolates. Now, because Maimonides discussed that even the wicked, he says, let's talk about what would make somebody be called wicked. What is the definition of wicked? What does one need to do to be wicked? Now, so Maimonides itemizes a number of wicked people, and it says that if they don't do teshuva, right? If they don't do teshuva, they do not have a share in the world to come. So now, does that mean permanently? It doesn't. It's the Talmud says that only those that are sinners and calls the multitudes to sin. But bottom line is, it's hard pressed for them to get into heaven. There's going to be they're going to need some redeeming factors. So Maimonides tells us what makes somebody bad, what makes somebody who's just and nobody. There's no such thing as a person being irredeemable. Everybody is redeemable, and if they don't redeem themselves, others can redeem them. Right? You have the children who are righteous. The children's merits help their parent who was wicked. So everybody's redeemable. We're talking about, though, that this is wickedness, and this is going to prevent somebody from going to heaven unless there's either teshuva or there's intervention by the kids or by community or friends, etc. So the first thing Maimonides says is a min. And he defines what a min is. So a min, right, is basically he doesn't translate it, but pretty much a min is an apostate. But there's also an epikoros that's also an apostate. So he does separate the two. What is a min? A min says either there is no God. No, there is no God. It doesn't. It's ridiculous. There's just no God. And the world doesn't have a boss, essentially. A min could also be that there's two bosses, there's two gods that run the world. That's equally as bad, right? That you either negate God or you say that God has a buddy, a partner, right? Now, while it's true we are partners in the universe, human beings, but we're clearly not God. We do things for God as God's partner. But to say that there's another God, that is unacceptable, right? Or to say there's God, but God has a form, and God has God is physical or corporeal, and or has a form. So that's also considered a min. God is an energy that cannot be seen, heard, measured, etc. He created form, measurement. He created energy, right? Likewise, somebody who idol worships, who says, you know what, I'm going to worship this star, I'm going to worship this block of wood, I'm going to worship this stone, right? So that would be considered a min. So I think the best word for min is is an apostate. So anybody fits in that category. So now, so the first one, it seems like if you're an atheist, right? If you're an atheist, you're in deep trouble. So I would say an atheist is probably mired in spiritual muck for sure. But I don't think your common atheists is a min, right? So you run-of-the-mill atheist that you meet, no, I'm an atheist. I don't think they're true atheists. I think they just lack knowledge. I think they're illiterate. I think their view of God is elementary, and therefore, from their elementary view, they're an atheist. So to me, when I meet an atheist and he says, "I don't believe in God," my response to them is, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either, right? Because they're just not knowledgeable. So what would be considered a true min? A true min, is somebody who's extremely knowledgeable, extremely involved, and has a good grasp on godliness. Perhaps had a rabbinical background, and then starts with the nonsense. Maybe that's a true atheist. But even then, maybe he had a bad teacher, or maybe he has a warped view of God. So maybe that's not a true atheist either. So an atheist has to be knowledgeable. An atheist has to be informed, have a background, and then come to a conclusion. But just to come to a conclusion out of laziness, that's not an atheist. That's nonsense. It's just nonsense, right? So remember, and I think it's a good line: the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. What is an apikoros? So an apikoros is also it's not a Jewish word. It's not a Hebrew word. It's an Aramaic word, and essentially it means that you scorn the Torah. So, for example, you say, "Nah, Moses didn't get the Torah from God. Absolutely not." Right? Or you say prophecy, right? You call Miriam a prophetess. You call Elijah a prophet. Nonsense. There's no such thing as prophet. God doesn't converse with us, period. There is a God, but it doesn't converse with us whatsoever. Right? Or an epikoros is somebody who says, "God knows my thoughts. God knows my thoughts. God doesn't know my thoughts at all, in any way, shape, or form." And so that is an epikoros, right? So these type of things would be somebody who basically denounces the relationship that a human being has with God. The first one denounces God. The second one talks about that you can't converse with God. There's no relationship there, and because of that, why bother to pray, and why bother to connect, and why do etc. So that's a slippery slope. So that's the first two categories. Very busy on the email today. Like, you hear it clicking. It's driving me crazy. The next category is if somebody denies the Torah. So not that God doesn't converse with us, right? Not that God doesn't converse with us, but rather it's different. The person says that no, Moses wrote the Torah. Wasn't God gave the Torah. Moses, just based on his understanding of good morals and values, he wrote the Torah. So that's considered somebody who just denies the Torah. Or somebody says, "No, I only believe in the written law. From Genesis 1 to Deuteronomy, wherever it ends, 31, I only believe in that. Anything else I don't believe in." And there are people out there, by the way. There's a whole Karaite movement, not too many left, that only believe in the written law. And that would be considered a denier of Torah, right? And you had the Sadducees. They, for example, also they deny the Mishnaic law. Nah, nonsense. Right? It's not inspired by holiness. This is just cranky old men. So that is considered a kofar, somebody who denies the Torah. Also, if somebody says that this mitzvah no longer applies, Kosher? No, it no longer applies. That's also a kofar. It's also a denier, and and you have that too, right? You hear people justify that the only reason we couldn't eat shellfish is because shellfish has to be refrigerated, and we didn't have refrigeration, and that's why, and therefore it wasn't safe. Now we have refrigeration, we can eat shellfish. Now we have refrigeration, we can eat pork because there's no risk of trichinosis, right? So therefore it doesn't apply anymore, or circumcision doesn't apply anymore, or Shabbat doesn't apply anymore, or whatever it may be. It just doesn't apply, and we're progressive. We've moved on. Torah is archaic. That's also part of the equation, is that you essentially reject the Torah. The correct approach is that the Torah is eternal. The lessons of the Torah are eternal. And while it's true on a technicality, we may not be able to offer a sacrifice. We may not be able to do certain things, give tithe, because we live in the United States and you're only obligated to tithe in Israel. That's a technicality. But to say it doesn't exist, just to say that it's this is no, that it's nonsense. It's already batel. It's already been nullified. That's a big no-no. So far we've discussed minim, apostates, right? Denies God as an example. Oh, there's multiple gods. Once again, the Epicurus is someone who denies the existence of prophecy, and there's no knowledge communicated from God to prophets, right? And the third one is someone who denies the Torah. The Torah has changed, and that's why as Jews we reject this whole notion of calling something the New Testament, right? If the New Testament means that it changes what's in the Old Testament, then it's not for us. If you want to say there are customs evolved, but it can't negate the original stuff. If it negates the original stuff, then that's a denier of Torah, right? The Torah is not subject to change. Certain things evolve. So now we have electricity. We didn't have electricity, but we still have the principles of the Torah to work through. This, by the way, was a great course. That's not humble. I'll take that back. This, by the way, was a mediocre course that we gave on electricity. It could be found in the Chai Academy. You were a great audience. Can be found in the Chai Academy. And there's a electricity on Shabbat. So we discussed that at great length. So maybe that's where the great came in, that it was just, it was an elongated course. But it was even, I can say it was rather shallow. But it's something. It's worth it. It's worth it to get a review of applying Torah in a modern era, right? So it's interesting. So if you really, so while we can be progressive, God forbid we don't want to negate what was there. Right. So there is room and place for progressivism for sure, and we've come a long way. But we cannot negate. Must not negate what the what the Torah says. Now there's something Maimonides calls a mumar. A mumar would also, I would translate as apostate as well. So I don't know what. So a mean is a denier, maybe. A mumar is an apostate. A mumar. So there's two types of mumas. One mumar is where you say he says, you know what, I'll keep the entire Torah, but this I will not do, and I'm proud of it. I think that taking leather boxes to fill in and putting them on your arm is stupid and is nonsense. and I'm proud that I will say I don't do it. Right? If somebody says I don't know how to do it, I've never learned this, I don't understand this, that's not a mummer. That's not anything. That's you try and educate yourself, or get others to educate. But to say, step up proud, to say, I don't do this. Right? I believe this is malarkey. I believe this is nonsense. Kosher. Right? That's absolutely not. And here I say a toast on something very non-kosher, right? L'chaim, to me, not keeping this mitzvah. So that is considered a mumma. And it doesn't matter, by the way, what the mitzvah is. It could be the smallest thing. If they're a mumma, they're a mumma. If there's something they don't do on principle, and they're proud of it, they're brazen, that is a mumma. Right? If somebody does, here's a very important point. If somebody doesn't do a mitzvah, or somebody doesn't, does something they're not supposed to do, right? But they're not proud of it, they're not a mumma. Right? Much higher, much loftier on the totem pole. They're not proud of it. That means that they have a herkish, they have a feeling towards it, and they just have to work on themselves to finally get it right. But here we're talking about a mummer is somebody who basically, says, spachim, I'm not doing this. Right? Nonsense. That's a mummer. So he gives an example here that the person says, so there is a mitzvah, there are a few mitzvahs that we don't have any reason for. God doesn't give us a reason, and it defies logic, or it just doesn't. There's nothing there. For example, shatnes. Shatnes is, as God said, you cannot wear interwoven wool and linen. You can wear wool and polyester, wool and cotton, cotton and linen, cotton and rayon, leather and wool. And you can do anything, but wool and linen, no, is out. And the person says, come on. There's a sale at Conway. Come on, it's ridiculous. So that would be considered a mumma, right? You can also have a different type of mumma that basically says, which is very similar to kofar, right? But the intent is to anger God. Torah shmora, right? So that could be more than one mitzvah. That could be all the mitzvahs. Torah shmora, right? I'm not doing this. I'm not subjecting myself to this. Eileen asks an excellent question. Excellent question. What if you don't agree with something? So the answer is that when we left Egypt, but before we left Egypt, we were called, the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, Israeli, because they came from Israel. Once we left, before we got the Torah, God coined us with another name, and the name was Tzivos Hashem. You are in the army of God. Now, what do we learn about the army? Is that when the general gives an order, right, when the officer or the private says, "Sir, yes, sir," and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the private's opinion is of the general's conclusion of what's the best way. What's the best way to go to war or do this or that or the other. Obviously the general should not be obviously the general should not be one who is obtuse and arrogant, etc. But we do it anyway. We just do it anyway. We're soldiers. We're soldiers in an army. Sir, yes, sir. So if it's a mitzvah, we do it. If it's an infraction, we stay away. We don't do it. And that's who we are. That's who we are. So agree, disagree, schmisagree. I don't know if you have a specific example, but there's certain things, by the way, that that for example, a vegetarian. So you don't eat meat. It doesn't mean the Torah allows you to have meat, and the Torah, sacrifices you have meat, etc. But if they're not a sacrifice where you may have to have, and I don't know what's going to be like when the temple is rebuilt, etc. But it says that you should have fish and meat on Shabbat. But if the idea is that you want to enjoy Shabbat, and it should be a rich Shabbat. But if you're a vegetarian and fish and or meat are going to nauseate you, then you're not having enjoyable Shabbat. So don't have it. So in that case, no, it's not for me. But if it's a biblical command, you got to do this, or you got to do that, or don't do this and don't do that. You're agreeing is really doesn't fit into the equation. You could say, I'm not there yet. I agree with it. So if you say, I don't agree with it, then you're a mumma. But if you say, I'm not there yet, I agree with it, I'm working on myself, I'm a work in progress, that's not a mumma. And once again, you're not a mumma if it's interesting, the code of Jewish law differentiates between somebody who violates the Sabbath with glee and with with pride, as opposed to somebody says, I don't observe the Sabbath yet, but I'm working on it. I would like to. The stars have to align, and etc. So somebody who says Shabbos, Schnabbos, right? So that person is the code of Jewish law says that person has there's issues, big issues. But if a person who says I don't observe Shabbos yet, or I'm working on it, or I don't know enough, that's not a mumma. That's a work in progress. So the big differences. So there's we have to do some introspection as to whom we are, and also we make mistakes, and for the mistakes we there's a way out. A mistake is not, thank God that God gave us an opportunity to do tshuva. As we discussed yesterday, Yom Kippur, 25 hours. It's a gold mine. It's a find. It's a treasure. And 25 hours, you don't eat, and you pray for a lot of it, sleep for some of it, and you're forgiven. Woohoo! That's a gift. All right, we'll stop here. Maimonides will continue tomorrow with some other things that we should be conscious of, and it's all attitudinal. You notice it's attitudinal. So if somebody says, I don't know enough about this mitzvah, I'm trying to understand it, I want to do it right, by not doing it yet, as opposed to somebody who says, I don't give a rat's right behind about this. Different. And the difference is attitude. The difference is arrogance. That probably would sum it up better. Arrogance more so than attitude. God bless. Tonight, please God, 7 o'clock, we will have the Tanya class. That's the goal. And so 7 o'clock tonight. Sorry about the delay. So many things going on. God bless.